Hi, I'm Laura Hahn-Segundo Collins,
And I'm Joy Han Silva Malora.
and welcome to Hahnacity.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How's it going?
It's going really well. I just turned off the filter in this room because it was a little bit noisy. It was actually really sweet. Marvin cleaned this room for me to record. My allergies have been horrific. He put on the filter for me to make sure I could breathe and not hack a lung as I'm talking to our guest and you. It was very
Vibes.
nice. It was very thoughtful.
Thanks, Marvin.
Thanks,
Thank you
Marvin.
so much. So we have an amazing guest today, our very first return guest, Blake
Woo
Palmquist,
woo.
who is with
Go
us in
on.
season two. Should I read his bio?
Yeah.
Okay. Blake Palmquist, originally from Bozeman, Montana, Blake began his soccer journey at a young age, excelling on high-level teams and nurturing dreams of playing professionally. After years of dedicated training, he achieved his goal of playing college soccer and later secured a position with a club in Valencia, Spain. However, Blake's professional career was cut short by severe anxiety, stress, and depression that ultimately forced him to step away from his lifelong dream. Returning from Spain, feeling lost and questioning his identity, Blake found new purpose in mental health advocacy within athletics. He created a blog sharing his story alongside others' experiences and joined Athletes for Hope, a nonprofit organization supporting athletes making positive community impacts. Blake dedicates himself to sparking change, providing support, and reassuring others that it's okay to share their feelings without fear of judgment. Without further ado, Blake.
Woo woo.
Woo woo!
Welcome, Blake. This is so exciting. You're our very first returning guest. So thank you so much for coming back. There's so much more of your story to unfold. And we briefly talked about how you're still in the process of like figuring things out, things going on in the past year that has been a complete life shift. So we're really excited to dive into your story. So with that, let's start. Where does your story begin, Blake?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just like anybody I know, it's always been the stigma of not wanting to share what you've been through because obviously, as we know, if you do, it's your weak, that kind of a thing. So going all the way back to when I was 4 or 5, I actually had some pretty bad fears when I was sleeping. And so starting young, I was already going to see a psychologist and trying to figure out ways to get over that because that also affected my days and not so much like what I did with my, friends growing up and stuff like that, but it was just very interesting as a child when you have those every night.
Oh,
So
how young were you at this time?
I'd probably say
Yeah.
between like 6 and 8, so
Oh,
pretty
wow.
young.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I just remember even from that point, things just kind of escalated, and my parents had to help me. They had to, always check on me at night and make sure everything was okay. And it was only at night, so during the day, like I said, everything was going great. Then, as that was affecting me, I also developed this habit of checking food labels. So I would always look at certain foods that weren't healthy, that were healthy. And a lot of that, I would say, stemmed from the whole image aspect, even from a little kid. A lot of the soccer that I was watching, even playing with kids same age as me, or even those who are older than me, you can unconsciously think about what somebody looks like and you want to be like them. So you want to like eat what they eat, those kinds of things. And you can never really say if it's like genetic for all these things you worry about. It's so hard to just say. But
Mhm.
I stopped eating like a certain amount of things. I didn't want to eat as much. It wasn't like a full diagnosis of anorexia, but it was on basically the verge of it if I were to, keep going that route. So I basically had to start taking some medication for that. So that was really hard. And if you had friends over and you had to take it at a certain time, my parents would they try to be discreet about it, but there's just sometimes where, it's kind of hard to help it. So that was a little embarrassing for me, even going to a psychologist, because sometimes it was hard for me because I didn't know if they were actually taking me seriously sometimes. That was also frustrating for me. So you have all these things start to build up. Once I got into middle school, I was a very, very athletic kid and loved soccer, but I was also a huge Seahawks fan, so I loved football too. So I tried playing tackle football and soccer at the same time, and it was fun. I enjoyed it, but tackle football was definitely probably the weakest link of my athletic abilities. But one thing that really affected me during that was specifically my coaches, because I can understand sometimes when coaches joke around and they expect the guys to be tough and that, you don't have feelings. But I just remember pretty much almost every day, if I were late to practice or I couldn't do a certain thing, they would make fun of me for playing soccer or because of how skinny I was, or, one thing after another. So it impacted me drastically. And I just think, like, how can a coach do this to me? Like, I'm a almost 10-year-old trying to play this game that's really fun for me that I may not be the best at, but I'm doing it anyways. And so I actually quit almost about halfway through the season because of the coaches on that team. So then I just quit and then went to the soccer club I was playing for back home.
Can I ask you a quick
So
question, Blake, really quickly?
yeah, definitely.
So, as a 10-year-old in your mind, did you love football and chose soccer because of coaches, or was it in your mind that you loved both equally? Like, did soccer become a choice because football like brought a lot of shame, or was it that it just sort of chose itself because you wanted to quit?
I think I wanted to do football because I thought I was good at it. I thought people accepted me during that time because I was playing it more. But I also at the same time still love soccer more. So even though I loved soccer more and enjoyed playing that sport more, I still wanted to do it because, again, it was the whole acceptance thing. You want to be accepted. You don't want to be known for being alone, that kind of a thing. So that was definitely a big reason why. And anything after that with football and anything is pretty much history. I mean, I'll still watch it from time to time, but I think even then still kind of makes me a little iffy about the whole thing. So
Yeah, it was so interesting because after our first season, Blake, the two males that came up to me that said their stories were very similar to the abuse that we went to when we were gymnasts were both football players and how football players talk to young boys. So this is really interesting because you're the third person that has brought up shame, like shaming an athlete in order to get or produce their best performance, that was such a tactic. And you're a little younger than us. And so it's interesting how that has not evolved very much within that time frame. So that just as a note, that was a connection for me to hear just now.
yeah, and I remember there was another moment too that was really embarrassing for me, and I just felt pretty much weakless. I was standing outside. We were on the sidewalk waiting for practice to start. It like snowed a lot, so we were just waiting for our coaches to clear it off, and the rest of my teammates were on the sidewalk waiting too. And for no reason at all, I just had one of the big dudes just completely flat out just shove me, and then I just like whipped my head back. I landed on the snow for no reason. And then my dad even got mad at him. And that was in front of everybody, and people were laughing and thought it was funny. And I think that's one of the things that I didn't start to know until I got older was I was a very empathetic and sensitive kid. And people took advantage of that. They still do today. But because of that, it was just so easy to get my trust, and then they could reel me in. So that's the unfortunate part about being very empathetic and sensitive as a person, because people can just take advantage of you in an instant. So that was the other part, that scenario that really affected me in that moment. After that, I really just got into soccer, and that was where my forte was at. Even though I had this other thing going on with me, I was a smaller kid, even through elementary school and middle school, definitely smaller, but very quick, technical. So I definitely was able to drastically outplay different players. And the only thing that started to affect me was when I started to get older, people started to grow, get quicker, but I didn't seem for that same thing to happen to me. And so I got frustrated with that. And again, I had coaches, they would say to me, and this was probably again middle school, end of middle school, you think you're a great player, you're quick technically, you can outplay players, but just size wise, you physically can't compete with other people. And so that's the reason why sometimes I wouldn't go to specific tournaments. I wouldn't be selected for other national tournaments or events that would really help me as a player individually and help my career that ultimate dream was to always play professionally. So that was definitely heartbreaking for me. But I will say the one thing back then that I'm really working on having back now is a goldfish memory. Have you guys seen Ted Lasso before?
Mhm.
Yeah.
One of my
Okay.
favorite
Love
shows.
Ted Lasso.
We talk about
Yeah.
It
it on
has
the
been
podcast.
literally a healing TV series for me personally. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Goldfish. Say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So goldfish memory, that's what I had when I was a kid like this. So any of these bad situations, whatever happened to me, it would go through one ear and out the other within that 10 second span, or whether it was 5 seconds. I was just like thinking, okay, that's fine. I'll just go on and I'll get back at it again. You get put down, you get back up. And then as I started to go on with that, it was the same situation. It kept going on and on. And then, I get these breaks in my life where it was about right before high school where I played for this team called ODP, Olympic Development Program. You go to Oregon and you play with all the different states, the best of the country. At the end of that, I was selected to play like one of the better teams in it. Best way to say it, I guess. So I would have like, these slips of time where things would go well, but there were a lot more slips of time where things just weren't really going my way. There were certain times where I did have to get help with, my height. And it got to a point in me when I was getting into high school where it was just, again, it was frustrating because I kept thinking to myself, how much help does one person need? How much money does one person need to, help them? And it was so frustrating. But again, I kept getting through it, kept going on throughout that same time with the soccer. I was never the best at math. So I got put into this. It wasn't like a study hall, but it was another class that was basically for people who need help with math. So that also created some stress and some depression a little bit there because all of my other friends would be considered normal classes where people go algebra 1. That wasn't heartbreaking, but it was just, just frustrating with that too. And then I was diagnosed with a little bit of ADHD. And then as I was going through high school at one point, still struggling with math, I was also diagnosed with dyscalculia, which didn't know later in time. Similar thing to dyslexia, just with math. Yeah, definitely would see those things where all like the math symbols and everything just like fly out of the whiteboard and just start mixing around. So I just look back now and thinking of all those things that popped up throughout my life. The other things too that drastically affected me was bullying for me. I was bullied in middle school just because, of my hair and again, my height. And I remember we were in this bullying seminar and it was like hour and a half, and we gotten back after it. And in our homeroom, one kid immediately just started. Luckily, I had a friend, step up for me and be there for me. Same thing happened in high school. Kids would make fun of me for my height. And the biggest thing that I would probably say affected me in high school was I became very reserved and shy. And that was mainly because of the people that I thought were friends really weren't. They would talk behind my back. When they were with me face to face, they would be true, they would be honest, I thought. But again, it's the whole empathetic and sensitive thing to what I thought was, a real fun friendship. We'd hang out with each other. They'd invite me to go do stuff, things like that. When I just go with them somewhere, they're super nice, super chill. But when they get around with other people, they become a completely different person. So that part was also frustrating for me. And then, high school also had some, partying, and I wasn't into that. And because I wasn't into that, that kind of put me out of the whole social scenario and social group. So I really only had one or two friends that I hung out with really the rest of high school. I knew other people, but it wasn't people that I would actually hang out with. But soccer was really the only thing that I was able to do to get through all that because you can just go, you can play. And even if you dislike somebody on your team, it doesn't matter. You get on a field, you just forget about everything. I had so much enjoyment, loved the game so much. But then unfortunately, there were a couple teams that I was on, and some coaches were still a little bit iffy. So that again was a little stressful for me because I'm trying to do the best I can to get to the point I want and thinking about it every day.
Yeah.
And so
Did you ever own your greatness as an athlete though? Because you're obviously like exceptional. In those moments when you were like, oh, like I'm smaller than everyone, or I'm doing everything that I can in order to improve my skill, but for some reason the coaches don't see me as the best kid on the team. But in those moments, did you ever think as a soccer player on the height of your soccer career that oh, I'm pretty good at this? Or was it always like, I'm not doing enough and I'm trying to please my coaches, the people around me, my teammates need to trust me, I don't fit in? Was it always a constant, like, I'm not enough?
I would say when I was younger, about elementary school and sixth grade, and a little bit before high school, I did think that because, I had great opportunities and I was, a little bit getting past the whole height thing. Coaches were accepting me a little more. But as I got into high school, that pretty much went away, I would say, because I was a friend with this other guy and we constantly competed with each other. And one of the biggest things that frustrated me is, obviously you're trying to always make varsity the best team your very first year because that's like amazing if you do. You don't want to not to say, nobody wants to go to Frostmore, but everybody wants to be on varsity to be on the best team. So that first year in high school, when he made that team, well, he made swing so you can go from JV to varsity, and I only made JV. That made me so mad. It made me jealous. I would actually say it made me a little petty, a little bit, if I'm being honest.
I think
But
that's
it
part of
was,
being a great athlete in some ways. You want to get great, and there's a
Yeah.
little bit of that competitive drive that's not necessary. Like I do think like, yeah, jealousy, envy, all that stuff, but a little bit of that I think also helps your game.
Yeah. It's the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson thing. Push each
Yeah.
other.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. Like the
For
greatest
sure.
analysis is your greatest competition is actually the best thing for you.
yeah.
So how did it unfold for you then?
So this is one thing where I really wish I had done. And again, as I'm younger, I don't really think about these things, but reflection and self-compassion would have been beyond helpful for me because I was able to do the whole goldfish thing, but I became a perfectionist and I was a high performer. If I didn't do anything other than those two things, I would just get so down on myself. It's always negative talk. The only people who would ever stand up for me were my parents. And, very fortunate to have the parents that I have because even to this day, like I would not be where I am without them. They're amazing. So those two things would have been very good to know how to deal with, but I definitely did not do that in high school. Always compared myself to other people, even if they were younger to me. And I think that's actually where the comparison part related to soccer and other people came into is even if they're, say, I'm in sophomore year, we had this one guy come up and he got past JV and started for varsity his freshman year. I kind of get a little scared and which is, good. You don't want somebody to take your spot. But now I start comparing to myself, how did I not make varsity just straight up freshman year and he did? Because I would say, oh, I can do this thing, but he can't. Thinking back at it now, the whole comparison like that was just, it's not good of me to do. Like everybody has their own way of doing things. But then when I say not good of me to do, you can also balance it with, it's okay to feel the way you do. And I can't remember the quote that I saw, but basically it was the whole thing of the best way to let yourself feel how you feel is allowing your emotions to go through you. If you don't allow your emotions to go through you, that's the only thing that's inhibiting you from anything because your emotions, you can't fully embrace them. So, I mean, high school, yeah, it just got more difficult. I lost a couple of friends. Things just changed. Life changes. I wasn't really thinking about what I wanted to do. I was still having to go see the psychologist and the therapist and trying to think about what I needed to do differently. But again, my parents had to really help me a lot. And actually, there were a couple times senior year where I just was so worried about what other people thought of me that I would actually have a couple of panic attacks. And there was one time that I actually had one before I was about to leave my home, and my mom was still there before I went out, and she actually had to just stop me, put her hands on my shoulder, and just like say, Blake, just breathe. Then I went to school, and she was like, "Are you at school? Are you gonna go in?" I was like, "Yes, I'll go in." So moments like that, again, it shows appreciation for your parents and any individuals that just help you out. But those times are just always tough for me because I just feel so embarrassed about it back then. You don't want to say, somebody asks why you're late. You don't want to tell them why. You want to make up a lie and just say, oh yeah, my car didn't start, or, something like that. So
Can I ask you a question about that actually? And
yeah,
that's a good segue. So
yeah.
as I'm listening to your story, as early as 4 or 5 years old, we have a kid who's going through stuff and parents who are really attuned and really supportive of where you're at. And you mentioned being a very empathetic person, sensitive is the word that comes up, and that we're a different kid amidst all this quote unquote normalcy around us, so to speak. But your parents are able to reach you and they're really supportive of you. So I'm actually hearing an incredibly brave and strong child with really brave and strong parents who have to navigate the waters of a certain kind of cultural environment, but being a different kind of kid who had different needs, but again, still incredibly talented, bright, loving, and kind. So, what would your parents say to you, or the people who are supportive of you? Like, there must have been some kind of resiliency. And you mentioned the goldfish mentality. You mentioned, sort of kind of like Spider-Man style, just pick yourself up and keep going. Where did you learn that? What kind of things would they say to you that sticks with you now as you're thinking about that time?
Honestly, sometimes they will show me pictures of when I was that age. And I actually remember there was this one video when I was younger at one of our old houses. I was listening to this Mickey Mouse song, but I was so happy. I was running around our place, just singing, just having fun. And every single time I think of that now, it's like, where is that Blake? Where is that Blake with so much joy that just does not care whatsoever about what other people think? And again, that's the fortunately terrible thing that comes up is as you get into those situations, you try as a young kid and as you get into middle school, high school, and so on in your life to just block out all those things. But if it happens so many times to a point where it really impacts you, it's hard not to take it in. So they would show me photos, they would remind me of that, and they would always say, where's the bright Blake you used to be? Or I remember in elementary school, I also made this, it was like this quilt art. It was a soccer ball and it said, be the spark. And so they would always say, be the spark that you've always wanted to be. We know you're the spark, you're our spark. So things like that is always something that stays with me. And even when I was younger, my mom has always been like this, but she's very into like quotes. So she'll tell me about quotes every day. And even till this day, she sends me these motivational quotes every day. They still do it to this day, even when I'm having a tough day. They'll call me without even having to ask. Some days it'll be like every single day.
They believe in you
Yeah.
and they remind you of how fabulous you are.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
the
you.
security of love is a huge thing for sure. I almost feel like we need to interview your mom next season.
Mhm.
Ideas for season 4, because I'm sure there's tons of story on her side of like seeing you as this little boy. And to hear her perspective of your story is probably incredibly
Yeah.
impactful because we talk about this all the time. This is like from the very beginning. It's not just the athlete. The impact of the family and how they are impacted by your story also matters. And so even in our season, we interviewed our siblings, and it was the first time for both me and Laura to hear our story through their lens. And it brought so much more perspective and healing. And it was just far more complex than we thought, just the individual going through. So I'm sure your mom and your father has so many like intricate pieces to this. And there's probably more than just be the spark. And they're like, oh my gosh, like seeing this little boy and trying to help build resilience and give him these motivations to like keep going, because obviously you were somebody that went really far in soccer. Like you were a phenomenal athlete. And I hope you can own that now. And I know it's been a process to do that, but they got you there, and they were there from the very beginning. And I'm sure
Yeah,
that's,
I could go into way too far about how they should definitely be on the podcast, but yeah.
Okay. What are your parents' names?
yeah.
Denise and Kurt.
Denise and Kurt, we are asking you if you could
Yes.
please be on
DM
for
us.
season 4.
Yeah.
We would love
Season
that.
4. We would love that. And
We
maybe
would be
can come
honored.
back for the third time with them.
They would love it. Yeah.
Ready to transform your athletic performance from the inside out?
Meet Laura Hahn-Segundo Collins, the athlete psychotherapist who's revolutionizing mental wellness in sports. Whether you're an athlete, coach, parent, or program, Laura offers 4 game-changing workshops: Whole Person Athletics Revolution, Connecting with a Trauma-Informed Approach, Remastering Me, Myself, and I, and Mindful Development. For more information, visit lcollinslcsw.com and begin your journey to holistic athletic excellence today.
So this is a good segue maybe then to what happens after high school.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
So after high school, becoming more reserved, shy, losing a fair amount of friends, actually ended up having to play with a club team of other groups of kids from the college where I lived that were like freshman and sophomore because they were still in the date range that could still play on our team because all of the friends that I knew that I'd been playing with, all of them just decided not to play for their last year. So I was like, okay, I still want to play. I enjoy playing. So played all year with them. And then as we got close to the state tournament, all of them couldn't play. So then I actually ended up going with just the year younger than us, which was still a very good team. So I ended up playing with them. And at that time, just because of everything that I'd been through, I kind of just lost the want and the drive to play professionally. So I didn't really even think about it at the time because normally you would go to scouting, recruiting, all that for D1, D2, all that kind of stuff. So I didn't do that. But what I didn't know is at the state tournament, there were scouts there from universities. And then there was one from a team in Bismarck, North Dakota. Never thought I'd, be living, playing soccer in North Dakota, but it's unique. So I met him and I actually got a scholarship there. I wasn't able to play my freshman year just because I was missing some of the math courses, unfortunately. But I started playing my sophomore year. Other than that, I mean, the freshman year, I would say I also had a little bit of a tough time too because of the whole reserve shy feeling. It was very hard for me to find trust in people, even if it were people who I liked spending time with. I didn't want to become too close with them. So it really took time for me to just be with them and see really who they are, that kind of a thing. And then there were times actually where image and how I look affected me. So there were times where I wouldn't even go to a class because of a certain way I looked that day. I thought I didn't look good or what other people would think or classify as good compared to what the social culture classifies as looking good. But even with that, I still actually made some friends, which it was great. And then sophomore year got a lot better. I would actually say sophomore year and halfway into my junior year were the best years I had in college because I was able to play. I was able to just have fun, have a good time. I actually got a little bit of that Blake when I was younger back. And then halfway through my junior year, we didn't have the best season. Let's just say that. And the funding for the team at that university got cut. And so all of us had to find a new place to play. So we had to transfer unless you wanted to stay and you were going to like a master's or something. So I was looking for places to transfer to. And I still saw it as a great opportunity. I could still play. When I had colleges reach out to me, there was one that we had played that was a very good team, very good coach. And so I accepted there. It's called Northwest Nazarene University. It's 15 minutes outside of Boise. Unfortunately, when I went there, the team there just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. They're a very good team, but I was just this complete outsider and nobody wanted to bring me in, accept me, or just find out who I was, that kind of a thing, because I was never invited to do anything, to dinners or to hang out, or even if we were just in a circle talking before a training session, I would walk over there and sometimes they would just dispatch. They would like go different directions. So when you're trying to find a way to meet other people, that's really tough to do when they don't even want to just be around. So I could tell the stress, depression, anxiety, all that really started to pick up a little bit. And then again, that was when COVID happened in 2020. I just knew something bad was going to happen with COVID. I knew Boise University had already told people to go home. We were going to be next. As soon as they told everybody to go home, I left basically the next day. And I honestly did not say goodbye to anybody, which, I could say I regret, but it was so hard for me to not forgive people who just even didn't want to give me a shot to let them know who I was, how great I was. that kind of a thing. So as I, got into the COVID year, I traveled a couple places, went back home, tried going back to Bismarck to see if I could do anything there because I still had a buddy who I could train with. That didn't really work out. So that's when that segue of really trying to become a professional happened. And so I was trying to think of places that I could go that would really put me in a spot that could maybe get me noticed, or people who had the same passion for soccer and wanted to go the same route that I did. And my brother lives in Portland. So I asked him, would you be okay if I moved to Portland and just stay with you for a little bit? So, of course, our parents thought, well, considering you guys fought a fair amount when you were younger, I don't know about that. But no, they were like, it's your choice. We think you guys will do great. So we ended up living that year together. And I basically trained by myself for the whole, well, actually, I take it back, not a whole year, basically like half a year until I was able to sign for a semi-pro team in Alabama called AFC Mobile. And as I left to go to that team, it was kind of just the same thing. It was the same scenario again, where everybody's just so, I understand the seriousness in sports and I understand wanting to be the best. And even if somebody makes a mistake and is having a hard time, you should still have empathy and not just take advantage of it. But that's what happened to me again. And all the comparing myself to other people who were doing well on that team or coming into the team affected me too. And I just let all of the thoughts in my head and comparison, how can I become a professional with, even just these people? I mean, this is hardly semi-pro. So that just affected me the whole time there. And I was benched a fair amount from playing. I wasn't playing like the player I was. And so that made me even more depressed and just sad because I was just losing the fun of the game because I couldn't let those negative thoughts go. And that's where that whole self-compassion thing is so important. Even if you just played the possibly worst day of your life, even if it's a whole season, it's the whole thing of not everything lasts forever. That I
Well,
wish
I
I had.
also, yeah, I also think soccer's so unique. Well, not unique in the sense of like other sports, but because you're a team and the trust of your teammates really has a reflection on how well you do, right? So if like you don't feel trust on the field, I'm sure that has a huge impact on the way that you play. Or if you don't feel like you're part of the team, that's going to suffer in your performance, right? And so me and Laura were athletes that were like based on our individual like doing. So if we messed up in the competition, it didn't affect our teammates in the way that it affected us, right? So there's so much more pressure when the line is you, and let's say you have a shot that you can win a goal or whatever, and you miss it. It brings this like thing with the team that I'm sure brings more pressure, extra expectations, because it's not you individually on that field. It involves the whole impact of the team. And so I'm sure it feels far more intricate, I think, when it involves that. If I messed up or I fell on the beam, yeah, I felt horrible. And it was my own like I don't want to say destruction, but it was like it impacted me individually. But my teammates' score didn't matter whether I stayed on the beam or not. For you, if you missed the goal, the team had less goals or could have lost or whatever, not go to the next round. And so I'm sure there was far more anxiety about performance when it involved more people.
Yeah, and I mean, any sport has its, unique scenario where if you don't do good, something's going to happen. So, I mean,
Yeah.
especially in soccer, if you don't play well and somebody else is playing better than you, it's just the reality of the
Yeah.
sport, which I understand. It was just hard for me to get past it. It was so
Yeah.
hard for me to get past that I couldn't perform the way I was. And it was because of those reasons I was always stressing about other people, what they would think of me. A single pass that I would not make. So that 10-second memory of a goldfish, all that was out the door. All that stuff was just affecting me consistently and
Yeah. Well, I'm
always.
also curious, Blake. I don't have much knowledge of your sport, but what I know, it's not like a high scoring sport, right? Like basketball where you have 100 and something points. So like if you miss a basket or you miss, like even with baseball, like the error of like striking out is so high, right? But you can get points like if you're on multiple bases, like you can score multiple points at one. But with soccer, you got one shot, one goal, and the error is pretty high too, right? And so I'm assuming that one goal could also be like a game 1-0 or 1-2. It feels like because it's not as a high scoring sport, that also brings an added element of nuance to soccer that is different and unique to your sport.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just on a different level, especially when you're younger as compared to when you get older. You try and think of all the things differently that you can do. But it's hard to, for example, if there's one pass that you have to make that's such a crucial pass to get somebody to score, you try and make that pass and then somebody picks it off and then they play it the other way and then they score and then they win. That's massive. So
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, soccer is a lot of just ones and twos. There will be threes and fours, and there's definitely been five, six, and sevens, which isn't always there.
Yeah.
So you really have to put in your craft of technique, understanding. It's very tactical, it's very knowledgeable, and you have to understand so many different components in the game. That was one of the things that I didn't necessarily think about as I was getting into a higher level. And I was really just finding out more about this as I was getting into it. So it was also just where I was at too, because nobody on that team ever wanted to hang out or do something. And if they did, I wasn't someone who wanted to drink alcohol or go out and party or something like that. I was just very devoted because I only had one goal, and that was to play professionally. And I know I couldn't do that if I was just going to be going out, partying, staying up late, waking up hungover, that kind of a thing. Depends on the person. Some people can deal with that, not be hungover. That's perfect.
You're the
No
Kobe
judgment.
Bryant of the team. Let's be real, Blake. You
Yeah.
just took it differently.
Yeah,
You were
yeah. So
serious.
yeah, so obviously I'm not judging anybody,
Yeah.
like that. But specifically just for me, it was just tough because I also lived with a host family and I still had that reserved and shy personality. So they let me stay in their bedroom and they had a pretty big house. They had a nice backyard. So I would walk around their neighborhood and things like that. But I would pretty much always just stay in that bedroom because I didn't necessarily feel great always being around people. And that could have been due to the COVID aspect, isolation, that kind of a thing. Because even getting back into socializing with people, that was still a little bit tough because you thought, well, am I going to get COVID standing next to them or being around them, that kind of a thing. So, I mean, there's just always things that you can think of. And that's always been one of my biggest things is the overthinking. Always overthink about things. I can think about so many different conclusions, try and draw the parallels between everything, what could happen. I do it so much throughout the day to a point where I could tire myself out from it. So, and again, that's built up over
Self-preservation.
time.
Yeah.
Well, then that's
So,
anxiety. That's
yeah.
anxiety is we are no longer mammals who are trying to run away from rhinos. That's the initial purpose of an anxiety system that we have in our minds. That's the relationship between the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala is responsible for flight, fight, or freeze. The hippocampus is responsible for filing memories, but when some kind of trauma happens, that goes to pumping cortisol. When we talk about stress and survival, and what I'm hearing in your story is just a constant state of survival over and over and over again. How do I survive being bullied? How do I survive being put down? How do I survive being the person that is being othered in this space? It's just all of these things are about survival, and that just what's happening in the body this whole time. I'm not surprised that at some point it's almost like a system overload to go into a state of panic or to isolate and sort of reserve your energy because we're not sure what's going to be safe. It must be exhausting as a young person during that time to constantly try to shore up where can I put myself out there and take a risk in hopes that will build connection. Because I'm hearing a person who wants to have teammates, wants to have friendships, and wants to be able to play with other friends. I mean, what better teams do we see out in the world than teams where they see each other as equals and friends? That, if you can finish each other's sentences, you can surely do a no-look pass, and then that person's going to pick it up. That is like the epitome of trust and understanding each other. And I'm so struck by your story about these multiple coaches and teams that aren't facilitating said trust. That's a sadness and disappointment on the part of those teams. That has nothing to do with you. You are an exceptional kid with wonderful talent and a huge heart and a vat of potential that they are not engaging. which to me, I mean, they're not here, so what do I care? But that's kind of shitty coaching on, part
No.
of the management and the coaching to be able to look and say, how do I get this team together? Because this person's really good at this thing and this person's really good at that thing. And if we put them together and help them learn each other a little bit better, man, we can knock it out of the park right now. As a very young person who's just learning about the world in many ways, how you had to really fend for yourself in so many ways. It speaks volumes to the immensity of your heart and the immensity of your parents' hearts to be able to come through with a heart that's still intact after all of that. And you do, because you're such a loving person, which we'll get to later, of course. But yeah, for me, I'm just in awe of you. I'm inspired, and I'm also hugging you because I'm hugging that kid version of Blake, who I wish we were all friends at the time, because we would have had each other's back as a community. What an immensely strong person you have been all this time, honestly.
Yeah. I would say like the sensitivity, the empathy is actually like a misstep for your team, because that could have brought so much more to your team in the sense of like getting to know your players, building that trust, because that is sort of your strength, right? Like is being able to understand others. And so what a misstep with all your teams. And I'm curious if there was a do-over, if you could hit the reset button and be accepted in these communities, how much more successful that could have been for all your teams. Because like Laura says, it's like once you build trust and knowing the player left and right and being able to hit a no-look pass, like that is just about like it's intimacy in a lot of ways, right? Like it's knowing that player well, finishing your sentences like Laura said. But yeah, what a missed opportunity. In some ways it's unfortunate, but I think being sensitive and empathetic.
That's also the nice way of saying, Blake, they're all idiots.
But that's such a strength, Blake. It's like, so when did you embrace this part of you? When were you like, this is kind of like my superpower? Because it is. It's a huge superpower. Not everybody has that.
Are you ready to embrace a healthier, more vibrant life? Look no further than With Joy, a transformative movement and nutrition program that goes beyond the ordinary. Whether you're a seasoned athlete or just starting your fitness journey, we've got something for you. Our comprehensive programs include mobility and conditioning to elevate your fitness, recovery and recuperation for healing, and nutrition wellness plans to fuel your body for optimal performance. Check out our show notes for more information and links to our programs. Join the With Joy movement today and discover a whole new way to thrive.
I'll say, like, going out through soccer, one thing I would always tell myself is that I don't want to be captain, because I'm not necessarily the person who will, I'll still be like the co-captain. Be like, if our captain's not saying, all right, guys, come on, we need to go, we need to get this going. Still do stuff like that, but I'm the person, if they feel like they don't want to go to the captain for something, come to me. Like, I want to be that person for somebody. If they're having issues with something, if they're having like anything just with school, life, anything like that, I always wanted to be that kind of a person. I wish I would have told more people that. I knew deep down I wanted to, and I would tell specific people that, probably more closer friends that. And, I would tell our captain that as well, too, because a captain should be the all-around model of leadership. But you also need to be the person who people feel comfortable to go to. And that was the thing. There was only maybe one guy in my 4 years of playing for varsity where there was one guy like that. My last year, was one of my friends who was not like that. I'm sure he's definitely matured now, but he was not like that. Did not respect other people. I mean, there's the whole thing of you still make fun of other people if they act a certain way or do certain things, just have certain personalities, and they don't think about how other people are going to act. And I'm not sure why. I don't know what's going on with their lives, that kind of thing. But that's one of the things that I do regret. And, I think for me, I started to think about it more, and I still haven't like fully understood how much and how I can use it quite yet. But it was more so when I got into college and I started to just gain more friends. And there were quite a few people who were just having a tough time, because college, you go through relationships, all this drama and stuff like that. And so I just started talking to people, and you just sit down for like 2 hours, 3 hours. And, I enjoyed just talking to people. It's the whole thing of sometimes people just want to talk. They don't need advice or, oh, you should do this, you should do this, because they just want to be heard. They're not looking for advice and solutions. if they do, they'll ask for it, which I'm more than capable of doing. And so that's probably when I started to figure it out a little bit more. My parents would remind me of it too, that I had that empathy and sensitivity part. But certainly, like sophomore year, it started, and then junior year, got more into it, understanding it. But then, as well, the whole empathy part, I do so well for it with other people, for other people, I should say. But I just was doing it so minimally for myself. And as I got out of Portland into the other team in Alabama, I just had enough there. And so I tried to get out of that, and I found this agency, and I was able to get over to them in Valencia, Spain. And it wasn't necessarily what I thought it was going to be. It's like an academy that helps players improve their skills and get to where they want to go, but they'll also help you get tryouts. So I did that, and I was able to get 2 tryouts, and one of them I didn't make, the other one I did. But at the same time, you had to train with other people. The thing that got me was they were younger than me. So again, I brought back that whole comparison thing. Every time I showed up to that training session with them instead of the other training session, I would go, I have to do this. Why do I have to, be training with younger people? Like, if I'm going to be devoting myself, becoming a professional, shouldn't I be, going to training and doing this with another team? And so, I was doing that for just under a year, and it got to the point where it was great to be in Spain, but I was alone, living in a place where none of the other guys that I lived with were the greatest. They never really wanted to talk to each other, not even myself. And so I ended up having to move my first apartment to this other one because those people almost got into a fight with each other because they disagreed. And then the other one I got into, the other 2 people got in a fight with each other, like a physical fight. And so, gosh, what is going on? And then along with that, I was training too much. It was like almost 2 times every single day of the week between training, conditioning, lifting. I weighed myself frequently, and I lost like 15 pounds from where I'd gotten there. I looked anorexic at that point whenever I talked to my parents. And I got to the point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. I didn't have like full on thoughts of it, but there was the suicide assumptions that came to my head, like I don't want to have to deal with this feeling anymore, that kind of a thing. And of course, I tell myself, well, there's no way I'm going to do that. Like, why would I ever do that? So definitely just push that aside. Like I did mention that to my parents. I talked to them at like 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. and they said, okay, we'll get you home. And so, yeah, again, I'm still having a hard time getting over it. But that point in my life has been very difficult for me because I always told people, watch me, I'm going to be a professional soccer player. And then my parents also put so much of their financial income into helping me become a player. You add those 2 things up, you do not feel good. I mean, depending on who you are, but for me, I did not feel good going back to Bozeman. And so that first 6 months I was back, I did not want to leave the house. I followed a ton of soccer social media. I didn't watch soccer on the TV for 6 months, didn't play any. I didn't know what to do. I was lost. I had no idea what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And so just fast forwarding a little bit, I just got a temporary job and started to look for other things. So I got into exercise science at a university there. That didn't work out. So I switched again to an online school. That was 2021 and into 2022, graduated that. And then just last year, I should say I moved to Phoenix first because I wanted to, get more noticed. Lived there for 2 months. Basically every day I would go on LinkedIn, get resumes, and was looking for other surrounding areas. Found Austin, Texas, moved out here and finally got my first place, which it's been great because I've been living out of a suitcase my whole life. And then the first 3 months were just super stressful because I had never done a 8:30 to a 4:30 or 5 job. And then once I hit end of August, I started to get these severe headaches and migraines after I was kind of getting in the groove of my job. Got friends from coworkers, meeting other people, and it was like very serious pain. Just it was all over my head, and I was like, okay, this is really weird. So it happened for a week. And then it happened for 2 weeks. And then the Monday into the next week, it was just severe pain the third week. So I ended up having to go to the ER, told them about what was going on. And they're like, okay, well, we'll do a CT scan. Went to the CT scan and they found a 2 centimeter calcified mass, or an AVM, on the left hemisphere of my head. But they also had to do an MRI and a CAT scan as well. So, of course, as I'm laying in the ER, the mattress by myself, and I have like some really good pain meds in my system, I'm like, all right, okay. So after that, the next couple of months were just brutal because I had to, let my manager know. I had to decide if I wanted to get brain surgery. I went through so many different appointments and I had to balance my job, and my paycheck declined a fair amount, which
Sure.
affected other things as well. But then I
Did
wasn't
they
so
say
sure
that
about the
this mass in your head was always there, or was it something that like calcified within time? Like how long was it in your like
so
crazy?
yeah, something like this, they just said it's always good to get a second, even a third opinion. So I got a second opinion from this very well-known brain surgeon here. And it's hard to say, but he said it could basically have been there your whole life from when you were born.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
So
Did you have
What in the
migraines and
world? What
headaches
in the
as
world?
wait, did you have migraines and headaches as a little boy, or would you say these like night terrors had an effect to is it, or was it completely disconnected? Who knows at this point?
I don't know. I mean, I never mentioned like the night terrors or anything with my doctors or anything. Now that I think about it, yeah, I didn't. So I talked to him about it, and I asked him if I want to get it out, is it worth it, or what else can I do? He said, you can keep it in or you can monitor it, but as you get older, we become more sensitive to disease, illness, all that kind of stuff. But he said, if you want to get it out, I would suggest you get it out 6 to 8 weeks. And this was November, and I was just thinking to myself, already maxed out for insurance purposes, and if you go into next year, it restarts all that. So just like let's just get it out.
Let's
And
do
so,
this.
and of course,
Oh
the
my
the
gosh,
only
Blake.
appointment that they had was on December 20th, right before Christmas. And
Yeah.
so my plan was to fly down to Montana, which is where I'm originally from, and always have an awesome Christmas there. I just love going there for Christmas, but that didn't happen. So my parents and then some other family, they flew down here and went in for surgery the 20th on Friday. And it was supposed to be between 3 and 4 hours, but it ended up being 6 hours because they found like some other abnormal stuff within the AVM, and then was just in the ICU 4 days after that. And then pretty much the progression for recovery after that was, especially the 2 weeks, was very tough because you're taking these pain meds, and I had 40 stitches in my head. And I had the image part of me. I had the stress about this, I'm anxious about this, I'm depressed about this. It's going into a new year. So it's been very hard for me to get past the recovery at the moment. So from the beginning to a middle to an end, I'm nowhere near an end yet, which is totally fine. And so now I'm just trying to figure out again who I am, because even the whole job that I'm in, the career, I don't even know if I want to do that. So, and even with that, along with everything that I've been through, being in all the appointments, the ER, the surgery, it just really fixed my perspective to, it's going to sound cheesy, but it's being very thankful. But it's also the whole athlete advocacy for me. It's really wanting to get into an area that is, maybe even more like speaking related, or it's more athlete dominant, because it's just so tough. Like I would never want anybody to go through any of the, is it okay to cuss on here?
Of course.
We cuss all the time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would never want anybody to go through any of the shit that I went through. It's just been, I get back to comparison, and there are some things that have changed from the surgery, but it's a lot of ups and downs. It's a lot of reminding myself that nothing lasts forever. Everybody is unique. Everybody has their own path. If people want to retire at 45 or they want to retire at a certain age, great for them. Everybody has their own way of doing something. So I'm just on a very unique path right now. And I've always told myself that, but it was definitely, yeah, pushed a lot more than I thought it was going to be. So
Yeah.
But yeah,
You're also like a resilient, badass motherfucker. I'll just say that. Like,
For sure. Holy shit.
what the hell? That is
One of the
crazy.
strongest ever
Yeah.
to ever do
thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Blake,
I
what would you
appreciate
say
it.
to yourself, looking back this incredible story of resiliency and disappointment and lots of love and talent, like so much is in your story. Thinking back to, and you choose a younger version of yourself at whatever age, what would you say to that young Blake today?
I would probably say high school, because high school was one of the worst, is probably a very harsh word, but I'm going to use it because it was probably one of the worst points in my life, just because it really changed the whole way my personality was. I used to be much more extroverted. So I would just tell myself self-compassion and don't take things too seriously. You're too young to be worrying about things you know or don't know that are going to happen. Everybody's immature when they're young. And when you get older and look back at it, I mean, I've actually even talked to some people today about past encounters and stuff like that. And they'll even apologize about things that I never really took like offense to, but they still do. So it's just one of those things. As you get older, you begin to learn, you can grow about things you even did in the past. So self-reflection, self-compassion, and just remembering that you have people there that are always there for you, especially your parents, whether you're your parents, friends, siblings. I think that was the biggest thing for me. But yeah, just be easy on yourself, especially now with everything that's going on, just socially and what social media has put on everybody and how you should be successful. You have to look a certain way. You have to be doing this to be successful. You have to make 75K. If you don't make 75K in a job, I can't date you or something.
Mm.
It's just
Mhm.
things are so unreal to me now. So it's just being yourself.
Yeah.
And if people care way too much about those kinds of things, they are not nearly worth even being around you at all. So,
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And I love that. The idea of vulnerability, for one, is that everybody looks down upon, oh, it's being vulnerable, it's being whatever. But then change the word. Let's call it transparency and honesty with what we're going through. Owning your emotions, like being able to just say, I'm going to choose this time high school because it was the worst. It's okay to just say it. And,
yeah,
the world doesn't explode because we're honest and transparent and speak our truth. And that in and of itself, I think can be really, really healing if we can say it in a space where it's just accepted. I think it's going to make really, really better all around, not just athletes and coaches in a sports world, of course, but just people, just human beings. We don't say that enough in general.
100%.
boy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show. Like season 2, we always end with a lightning round of discuss. Would you like to play discuss one more time? Possibly 2 or 3, because we're going to have you back.
So we're definitely bringing Denise and Kurt here.
Yeah. So your discuss question is, if you won the lottery, what would be your first irrational purchase?
I would honestly say I had a friend, he had this surfing boat and it would create these waves. So you could go surfing like just in a lake. I would probably get a surfing boat. I just thought it was so fun because I've always wanted to surf and I couldn't do that in Montana. Now I could. So
Yeah.
Love that.
Amazing. That's a
Love it.
perfect answer. Laura?
Mhm. The only thing, this is really sad. No, maybe, I'm not going to judge it. The only thing that's coming to mind is that I would take everybody who's in my crew, which Blake would include you, and we'd all go to Peter Luger and eat a whole bunch of bacon and steak.
nice.
Just bacon and steak, nothing else.
I mean, if you guys want to get some whatever cream spinach, that's all on you. Potatoes are also good, delivery
Yeah.
system of carbs and butter. I would be okay with that as well. Mhm.
That's hilarious.
Boy, how about you?
That's a good one, actually, for you. So I have had a love affair with old Broncos. And so, like, I always tell my husband, if we ever make it big, we need to get a vintage Bronco and soup it up, like, West Coast, like with the hydraulics and everything. Like, I would want to, like, soup up a vintage Bronco. That's what my irrational purchase would be.
What color would it be?
Ooh, okay. So I've been looking at this one website. It's actually called Vintage Broncos, and there's like certain colors that I love, but I think I just go with like a classic white and keep it clean. So yeah, that was
Nice.
anyways. Yeah. Blake, thank you so much for being on the show. We love you. Hope that road to recovery is going well. Keep us updated, and we're cheering for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so awesome to be back. Super grateful. So thank you for reaching out, and yeah, can't wait to potentially.
Yeah, mom and dad's coming.
Oh yeah, we can't wait to have you, Denise and Kurt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna we're gonna reach out to them.
That's gonna happen.
We are. Amazing. Thank you so much, Blake. See you soon.
Thanks, Blake.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, please reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Share and follow us on Amazon, Spotify, and Apple. Help us out and leave a 5-star review. Thanks.